World of Tanks console is about to get some huge revolutionary updates to the gameplay, supposedly. At least that's what Wargaming have said, and we're going to kind of go through some of the sneak peek into what those changes are going to be, and some of the quality of life initiative that World of Tanks console, including PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, S, blah blah blah, all of those are going to be receiving in the actual game. So, without further ado, we're constantly working behind the scenes on new ways for World of Tanks Modern Armor to provide a fun and engaging gameplay experience for all tankers. The changes we've been exploring are what you can broadly call quality of life updates. In the article, we're going to cover the proposed plans for some of the changes we're looking at, talk about why we want to make these changes, and get into some specific details. These changes are planned for the release over the next 5 seasons, starting with July 29th update. Our goals for this strategy are straightforward: improve the overall quality of player matches, re-level the playing field, and encourage meaningful gameplay strategy. We plan to accomplish these goals by improving the following areas of the gameplay experience. So that's quality of battles, tank balance, and gameplay balance. So quality of battles is we want to increase average match times to encourage strategic gameplay and find additional ways to reduce frustration and add more fun. Tank balance, we see a benefit in incentivizing tech tree progression and re-leveling the disparity between tech tree and premium vehicles. This is all great. We'll talk about my views on some of these things in a second. Gameplay balance, planning to rework loadout customization options to support a greater number of meaningful choices and tactics, and also explore other ways of mitigating steamroll matches. So, obviously, quality of battles. I mean, from my standpoint of someone who has played from pretty much the very beginning of World of Tanks console, at least like Xbox 360 era, that was a long time ago now, all the way through to current day, pretty much playing most of the years. I mean, maybe like a year or two I missed out of those where I wasn't really playing that much, but primarily playing the entire time. Now is probably the worst state of kind of quality battles, and what I mean by that is like the general ability of anyone that you come up against within the game. There is a very like players are lacking in being able to actually make the correct decisions, in my opinion, as in they still happened back in the day. It's just at this moment in time it seems like most people are just so funneled into using the auto aim features, being able to use high alpha with pretty much no like negatives whatsoever, meaning that most vehicles which don't have high alpha never get played, and when they do get played, they only get played for a small amount of time because people just do not have the experience of playing them, and it creates this whole circular loop whereby people can play medium tanks, for example, really well, especially experienced players, and they're very good with the high DPM rates and the increases in DPM that crews give you now compared to what they used to. And so they can be mega effective in the hands of experienced players, but as a newer player, you generally are so used to playing all of those high alpha TDs because it's been what Wargaming have pushed out over the years, over the last 3-4 years. It just seems like alpha is increasing, and like people have got used to that, and with the increases in accuracy, there's no real negative to having more alpha versus smaller alpha. The only difference would be the slight changes in DPM, whereby typically lower alpha damage things have essentially more DPM, whereas higher alpha damage things have less DPM, and in some cases that's not even true. So most people are now just picking high DPM, high alpha vehicles, things like the Turan, the Waffly 100 with a high clip potential, the Grilla 15, the T110E4, you know, all of these high alpha vehicles, the Roofless, and all of the FV 4005, all of these tanks, and because the accuracy is not bad, it means that basically anyone can play them and have no negative drawbacks. They don't have to think, they just look at someone. The increases in penetration we've seen over the years make heavy tanks pretty much completely useless compared to what they used to be, where you could actually bounce rounds reliably. And people will say, oh yeah, but I've bounced loads of damage in my E100. And yes, that is the case, but this is often against players that have no idea what they were doing, and you would be able to do that in the past anyway. But as soon as you get up against a competent player, they can pretty much pen you every single time, because they just load premium and aim for the weak point, and they can pen you every single time, even if you're angling in the best of ability. And sometimes they don't even have to pen with tanks like the Centurion AVRE or the Death Star, the FE4005, the Ruthless, anything that has high alpha Hesh rounds. They can just hit you for 600, 500, and they don't even have to aim. Those sorts of tanks basically remove the quality of the experience of anyone trying to use anything that isn't just those high alpha TDs, and it's why we've kind of had this TD meta which has been in the game for a long period of time between like the normal players of the game, the casual players, because remember, most of the player base of World of Tanks console is casual dad gamers. The dad gamers, it is what pretty much makes up the audience of this game, I think. And that's just from, I mean, I can even look at my analytics on YouTube. So you probably are between the ages of 25 and 45, something like that. That is where the majority of the audience is. There's very little like 13-year-olds, as much as you would probably think there might be sweaty 13-year-olds who just play the game after they come home from school. Primarily, from what I can see, it is anywhere from like 20 to 45. I mean, there's even a vast proportion, like 20% between 45 and 60, I think. So that's 1/5 of the player base between that. So there's lots of older players, older dad gamers, maybe people who don't have the time to just sink in 7, 8, 9, 10 hours a day, because they have no other commitments in life. So yeah, this is often a thing that both is very difficult to balance, because a lot of the casual players don't have the time to learn the game as well, but they also reward in gameplay, and of course they are the primary purchasing power of the player base who, you know, come on, they play 5 games on a weekend or something like that. They buy a new premium tank because it looks cool. It might not be good, it might not be bad. They don't really follow anything on the websites because they don't have time. And whilst you who are watching this video might follow along with what happens in the community, etc., the amount of people that do is very, very low. So it might be like 10% of the community even watch anything on YouTube, maybe less than that. I might be saying it could be like 5%, for example. I mean, console doesn't really have that much of a YouTube presence, to be honest. Even the actual game releases on YouTube only have like 20k views usually, sometimes like 10k, sometimes like 5k, you know. There's not a huge amount of people watching, and so it's very difficult to gauge exactly where the majority of the player base actually are in terms of skill. But the idea is to try and kind of not force them, but do it gradually, I would suppose, in a way that basically tries to level up people's experience with the game and makes it more rewarding when you do actually do things that aren't just I press one button, I press another button, and boom, the tank that I'm looking at is completely removed from the garage, or back to the garage. So that, I think, is definitely something that is a problem, especially for newer players, because they jump on, they get hit by a super accurate TD that shouldn't really have super accurate stats, something like an FE4005 for full health in their medium tank that they thought looked cool and would be interesting to play or whatever. And whilst it might be for an experienced player, for a newer player, it's much more difficult to avoid that, and it just leads to that annoyance, I think, and like frustration, which I think is pretty much what is summed up here. So I completely agree, definitely need to improve the actual game, and increasing average match times will generally help with that, because people are forced to think of other ways of going about a battle, rather than like, oh my god, we've won one flank, let's just push that completely into the enemy cap circle, and then if anyone tries to come back, we'll just sit here and go toe to toe with them. You actually have to think about things a little bit more when there is an increased match time. But the way in which they do this is very important as well. How are they going to improve the match times? Tank balance, we see a benefit in incentivizing tech tree progression and releveling the disparity between tech tree and premium vehicles. So, obviously, tech tree vehicles used to in the past, for those of you who haven't been around for anywhere near as long as me, something like 10, nearly 11 years probably now. It might even be 11 years. But essentially, tech tree vehicles in the past used to have, basically they'd be better than premium vehicles in most senses. Not every single one, but generally, if you played a tech tree vehicle, it wasn't like you were at a significant disadvantage against a premium vehicle, because premium vehicles in the past used to have one good thing about them that was maybe nuanced, something a bit different, something kind of unique about it that made it a worthwhile purchase, rather than now where they kind of dug themselves into this hole whereby they release a premium vehicle. Okay, it might have been unique, but the next premium vehicle they release, they're like, well, let's repeat what we did with the previous vehicle, but let's give it something a little bit better. And so they maybe, rather than it having just very good DPM and nothing else really, no armor, no view range or whatever, let's add an extra bit of view range, and then it sells more. Because everyone's like, oh, this tank's just better than the old one. So no one buys the old one, they just buy the new one. And then what happens then is they then go, oh, how are we going to beat this? We got this unique thing about this tank, which is the main selling point, or was, but let's add some view range to it now. And then everything starts to become better than the tech tree vehicles. All of the premium vehicles having more DPM, having more view range, having more speed, everything having more accuracy than tech tree vehicles. And eventually it just leads to the state where if they release a premium tank that only has one good thing about it, no one buys it because they could just go and buy a different tank which has everything on it already. So the only way that I can see that they're actually going to do this is if they buff all of the tech tree vehicles to the level at which you see a lot of those premium vehicles. And then from there, you can then buff those old premium vehicles to make it, in line, so that maybe they do have one good thing about them compared to everything else. And so they still are worth buying if you want that interesting mechanic, but they're not just outright better in every single way than a tech tree vehicle. For example, like a Tiger P is worse than a Hammer in literally every single way, except maybe armor. But as I said, armor doesn't really work in World of Tanks console, especially on things at like tier 7, tier 6 and tier 8. They don't really ever bounce rounds, to be honest. Even Tiger 2s, I mean, you pen it through the upper plate with anything at tier 8 with premium rounds as a premium vehicle. So yeah, if you can improve all of the tech tree vehicles whilst leaving the premium vehicles the exact same, or some of the older premium vehicles that really aren't very good in the current meta because they've just been way outclassed, the power creep of those premium vehicles, I think it would be very, very good for the game. Of course, then you aren't changing any of the premium vehicles that people have purchased, so you don't have to essentially refund anyone for changing their vehicle. And I'm pretty sure that legally you don't have to refund. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I'm nothing like that, but I'm pretty sure when you buy something on a video game, which is something that I think is actually very bad, is that, especially in live service games, for example, is that you buy only a license to that content. So in the same example that if World of Tanks console shut down, you would have no access to any of the vehicles that you purchase. You cannot use them, you cannot play them, you can't even go onto the game. The game is just completely removed. It's what the whole Stop Killing Games initiative was about, is that if you purchase something in a specific game and then essentially the company shuts down and there's no way of actually accessing the game that you bought because all of the servers are down, then what have you actually bought? And it's kind of about stopping that sort of thing from happening, whereby if a game does actually eventually, get removed or shut down or whatever, there's people still having access to that game. But yeah, either way, essentially what they are going to try and do, I would assume, is buff all of the tech tree vehicles, keeping the premium vehicles in line and reducing the disparity between the two. That is basically the crux of what I think they should do, and hopefully that's what they are doing with this tank balance update as well. Gameplay balance. So we're planning to rework loadout customization options to support a greater number of meaningful choices and tactics, and also explore other ways of mitigating steamroll matches. Now, This is something that I think has been a big problem. It's probably my main issue with the current state of World of Tanks, because whilst the premium vehicles being way better than the tech tree vehicles is a thing, there are still very good tech tree vehicles, and if you play in a very good tech tree vehicle, you can outclass even a like very overpowered premium vehicle if you have the skill level. But the gameplay balance, this is something whereby it is very frustrating. It's probably the thing that causes the most frustration, is that currently in the game, there is not really any customization really with the crew skills or the loadouts that you're using within the game. So when we jump onto the game, you know, you get your typical equipment slots, you get 4 slots. One of them is basically not really a slot. It's the enhanced targeting info, which is basically very crucial for players that are trying to shoot behind obstacles. It's the main reason why I don't swap this out, because of the fact that you cannot see the outline of a vehicle when it's behind cover or even in a bush, for example. So it's very difficult to go for tracking and damaging shots at the exact same time, because you can't see the vehicle. It's completely invisible to what you would see, even though it's spotted. You also then have the issue with, it's just basically a very good tool to improve your damage and improve the rate at which you're getting assistance damage at the same time. So as a experienced player, I don't see any reason why you would not use it. I think a lot of people don't use it because they're like, well, it doesn't really do anything, but they also miss out on a ton of damage or assistance damage, whereby you're tracking people behind bushes, or you're simply just missing because you can't actually physically see them. And whilst you can aim for center of mass of where their little icon is behind the bush, you don't know exactly where you're hitting, so you can't aim for weak points in bushes or whatever. You can go for tracks by aiming lower, but you don't know if they're maybe turned a little bit, and they're actually only showing the front of their tank, so you don't know whether to go bottom left to try and track to hit the track. Or you don't know if actually, you know, you need to hit the lower plate, but maybe they're angled up or whatever. It just makes it very difficult. So essentially, you've only got 3 equipment slots, in my opinion, in what you can actually choose in your game. So the idea would be to essentially change up how that equipment works. That's what I would do. Obviously, they haven't really given us a whole lot in terms of what they're actually going to do with those. But what I would like to see is that the gameplay balance, they start removing the big bonuses that things like, for example, on the crew skills, steady aim gives you. A flat 10% reduction in, accuracy is nice. You know, it's nice to hit where you aim, but at the exact same time, when you've got FE 4005s and these huge alpha TDs that have basically medium level accuracy, it makes a very big problem. It's why you're seeing lots of these TDs floating around in the matchmaker, being very annoying and getting one shot, as well as one-shotting other people. It's just very annoying, and it also means that, you know, when you have such good accuracy, it just like makes every tank that has less alpha or simply less DPM kind of pointless, because accuracy doesn't really mean anything. Even a KV2, which is, you know, the meme derp tank, can hit someone on the move across the entire map and hit reliably. Like, we're talking maybe 60% of the time you're actually going to hit. If you're moving at a slow pace on the move across the map whilst auto-aiming someone, you're probably going to hit them if they remain still. So that is a massive problem. That used to be a fun, exciting vehicle to play, because it was like, oh, if I hit someone, amazing, I've actually hit them, that is crazy, I got super lucky, etc. Whilst also being able to fight close quarters, which is what the tank is supposedly about. But now everyone can fight from long distances, so heavy tanks sniping in the base, it's just not the gameplay experience that you're supposed to have, where you've got mediums trying to fight in the towns, heavy tanks sitting at the back in bushes. It's just very bad. It's not incentivizing the actual tank class roles. And these sorts of perks and equipment are really what is causing all of that. And everyone can pretty much run the exact same crew skills and the exact same equipment on like 90% of the tanks. There might be like 1 or 2 crew skills that you might swap out depending on what tank class you're playing. Or there might be like very nuanced vehicles that are very specific and that maybe they could deal with something a little bit different. But for the most part, if you want to play the most optimal builds of all of the tanks, they're pretty much 90% of the perks are going to be already picked for you. You can't really change them because they just work on every vehicle. So things like run and gun, steady aim, camo expertise, born leader, sixth sense, whatever, rapid loading. And that's pretty much 7 or 6 perks right there that every tank pretty much has regardless of what you play. Like, you do not change those pretty much in any of your tanks, regardless of if they're a light tank, a tank destroyer, a TD, not TD, but a heavy tank or whatever, medium. It doesn't really matter. You always pick those perks or crew skills. And whilst you can change them out, they're just not as good if you do that. So this is something that is an issue. You might change, like add in, for example, if you're playing a T95 and you want this unstoppable build where it repairs its tracks really quickly and just storms forward, you can change it up and make a nuanced build of that, and it's fun. But at the same time, it's just not anywhere near as good as if you just took all of those perks and equipment that I just told you. So, and then you've got the equipment. I mean, like, probably 70% of the equipment I have never used because it's utterly pointless. It is very, very specific scenario things that, you know, when you can take a 10% increase to your DPM across the board, regardless of the situation you're in, it's just 10% over, you know, taking reduced fire damage when you get hit or something like that and set on fire, which may only happen once every 5, 6, 7 games or whatever. Like, I just always take the DPM because that's every game, every moment in that game. Whereas the fire, yes, it might ruin one of your 8 games that you play, but the other 7, it's doing nothing for your actual tank. So that sort of thing, really not really used ever. And if you are using it, I'd highly recommend not using it, at least at the moment. And so I think what I would do is change up the rapid loading so that maybe it is something that only works when you're in a very close proximity to another tank. It means that tank destroyers would not be able to actually get high DPM while sitting miles at the back where they can't be spotted with increased accuracy. So if you're close to someone, you get increased DPM. So it engages those brawling fights where you're actually close to someone. So something like that would be great. It means that, yeah, not everything at all moments. And it means that some tanks are going to go, well, I'm not really going to be close to anyone because I'm playing a TD. So I'm going to take something different. And so you're forced to make a different choice, or you make a more rewarding choice for the tank you're going to play. Now, maybe you're playing a Yag Tiger and you're going to play it aggressive, and so it makes sense to take the DPM because you're going to be close to everyone else. Whereas, you know, if you're using a Grilla 15 and you're sniping at the back trying to avoid getting ever close to anyone in the entire game, then having a DPM perk that is only usable when you're very close to people aren't going to pick it, and it means it's actually more useful to use something else that you maybe wouldn't have before that suits the tank that you're playing. Same with, for example, coated optics. I think they could also go with a limiting in what you can actually use coated optics on. So in my opinion, heavy tanks being able to spot light tanks that are firing when they're inside of a bush against the heavy tank at like 380 meters away, probably not very good for the light tank gameplay. And this is often a thing that light tanks are suffering with right now. I think they're in the worst place possible out of all of the time that I've played, because everything has like 450 meters of view range if you're playing up at like tier 9, 10. Pretty much everything, regardless of if you're a heavy tank, a medium, a light tank, a tank destroyer. Even artillery have ridiculous view ranges that you can get outspotted in light tanks by heavy tanks if they're in a weird position. Like, that should not really ever be a thing, and it means that playing a light tank, you have half the health of some of the heavy tanks in the game, or some of the tank destroyers, as well as the fact that, yes, you are fast, but there's still very fast mediums in the game that pretty much do your job anyway. They have more health, they've got more DPM. Things like the Manticore, they're smaller, so harder to hit, but at the same time, because of the accuracy buffs we've had, it means that the problem is everyone can hit you quite easily if they actually aim and can aim in the game. which punishes you even further compared to some of the other tanks in the game, which would get hit regardless because they're much bigger anyway. So the advantage of being a smaller vehicle like a light tank doesn't really make much of a difference. And whilst you can avoid shots if you're an experienced player, especially if you play light tanks, by doing some fancy maneuvers where you're trying to avoid people auto-aiming you, which you can do if you drive sideways to where they're actually at, because when they fire, it goes in a straight line at the point that they fired at. And if you have moved horizontally, you're moving further away from where that shot's going to be, so it's going to go behind you. So this is something I see people doing all wrong completely all of the time, is where they go directly away from someone or directly towards them. The best chance that you can do is go like in a 45 or more degree angle away when you see that someone is auto-aiming and you see that their barrel is just moving in a flat radius. You know, if it's janking about, it's probably that they're actually aiming at you, so it's not going to make as much of a difference. So often if you see that someone's aiming at you, you can then turn quickly and maybe go straight towards them, and you can bait them, you can turn the different direction, and it means that it's harder to actually aim. Whereas if you see them auto-aiming, you just drive horizontally and they're not going to be able to hit you unless you're going very close to the person, like very close, or if you're like get stuck on an obstacle or something like that, you know what I mean? Either way, changing up the equipment I think is very important, making them more situational, so the big ones that actually boost in all scenarios, either limiting what classes can use them, so light tanks can only use, for example, coated optics on the tank, or as it's called now, advanced optics, having that only available to maybe light tanks would be nice, because it means light tanks are rewarded for being the spotters in the game. It means tank destroyers can't sit at the back and outspot light tanks that push them and then one-shot the light tank in one shot because they've got high alpha and good accuracy. As well as the fact, like we said, if you made it so that the accuracy changes were that actually tank destroyers aren't going to get any accuracy changes and they're going to get like nerfed, so they're going to be worse, or that the crew skills actually don't give you a flat 10% increase to accuracy, and they actually remove that, because they can do that, by the way. They can completely remove the accuracy perks. They can, because it's not purchased, no one's bought the actual perk. You might have bought a slot to get the perk, but at the same time they can change it completely. They can remove the perk. It is a gameplay addition. It's like the core gameplay of the game. No one buys the core gameplay thing of the game, so I'd highly recommend changing up the actual perks so that they are more specific if they're going to do these big bonuses to accuracy, and make it so that they are rewarding certain styles of gameplay. And it means it's going to create a much more diverse range of equipment and make actually creating vehicles feel like they're your own, rather than just, okay, I got to put on the same perks again. This is boring. I don't even have to think about the tank I'm playing. I just see, it's a heavy tank, I'm going to put this on. And then roll into the battle. You know, you can make it your own. You can try new builds. You can experiment to see what actually works the best for you as a player, rather than just, this is the best. Like, objectively, it's the best. So that is something that I think that they really need to work on. So I know that this video is going to be slightly longer than what maybe we needed to, because if I could have glanced through this or whatever, I'll have put timestamps in the video either way. But I think it's important that, like, I give my opinion or open up the conversation to you guys as players, and maybe even just explain some things that maybe you hadn't thought about. And I'm sure there's loads of things that I haven't thought about as well. But if we don't talk about it, these things are never going to get done, because maybe Wargaming don't even think about them themselves when they come in to balance the game. So I think it's very important that we actually do come up with some situations or some examples of things that might be beneficial for the game. So yeah, that's why this video is longer than maybe it needs to if I'm just reading the article, which some people are like, this video is too long. You should just read the article. And I'm like, if I was doing that, then I would just simply post a link to the article. That would, like, go and read it yourself if you just want a bulletproof list, a bullet point list. Anyway, within those areas, here's what we're specifically working on. Balance changes for Tecturian premium tanks, terrain handling for Cold War mode, player performance matchmaking. So terrain handling, what I assume that they're saying here is that they're going to nerf the overall speed of Cold War mode, because as we know, Cold War mode, pretty much like the new player area where lots of new players jump in and they play. And so it's a very blowout game mode, to be honest, whereby pretty much a team goes one way and then whoever wins the flank the fastest by just YOLOing pretty much wins the game. And so, yeah, what I think they're trying to do is reduce the speed of a lot of these tanks so that you get more of the classes and class-based gameplay that you don't usually get within the game. So essentially when you go over, soft terrain, you might be slower versus hard terrain. And so those bonuses might be different. So if you go into a marshy area, you're kind of slowed down quite a lot. And certain vehicles might be better in the marsh versus some of the other ones. So light tanks might move faster through the marsh areas than, say, for example, a heavy or like a super heavy version of a tank or something like that. So I think that would be very good. Player performative matchmaking. Now, I don't know if this is a good idea, because if I think that this is what it is, this always ends up badly for whatever game you play. Like, regardless of whether it's World of Tanks or something else, if this is essentially like an ELO or ranking game, like matchmaking, so that good players will play against good players, bad players will play against bad players, mediocre players will play against mediocre players, this often leads to just boring games, because what happens is that there is no kind of interesting games. Everything is the exact same, and it's always like a struggle to just basically play. No one can have those crazy games where you feel excited because maybe you've had really good games against anyone. At the end of the day, World of Tanks it primarily is more of a casual dad gamer play style, whereby you jump on, you have a bit of fun with your mates. Maybe they're not so good, maybe you're better, maybe they're way better than you, maybe they're top 1% in the game, and so, but you might be brand new to the game. This sort of thing, I really find that, player performative matchmaking, or whatever they're trying to say here, if it is what I think it is, whereby it is like ELO or ranked, basically, so that you're playing against only people of your skill level. I think that is a very boring like matchmaking system, that whenever I've played a matchmaking system like this, it just ends up being like a slogfest, and you just don't want to play, because every game is hard, every game is the exact same, every game is just same tanks, especially as you get further up in the game. Like, the better you are, the more you're coming up against basically just the overpowered tanks, because that is what gets you the best matchmaking possible against players that are, might be of the same skill level, but they're playing a worse tank. And that is the case for all of the skill levels, because even if you're a mediocre player, there's going to be people that will still play Tyrans or whatever against you, and you might be playing, an FV215B heavy tank. Like, it just means that people play the more overpowered tanks more, and they play the most meta, and it basically stops you from being able to play in different variations of different tanks that aren't meta, that aren't the best in the game. And for me personally, I am not a big fan of playing the most meta vehicles, the best in the game, the most overpowered stuff. It's games that I find very boring. I don't feel like it's me that's actually performing, it's just the tank I'm playing. And so what happens is you basically are going to be at a significant disadvantage in those games, because whilst you might be a very good player against someone else who's a very good player, it doesn't really end up very well, because it just means everyone ends up using the exact same stuff. And I really hope that this isn't a ranked based thing. Maybe it's something completely different and I've misrepresented it here, so just beware of that, caveat that. I'm not saying that that's exactly what it is, that's just my interpretation of what I think that they'd be saying here. Performance-based matchmaking, that's basically what I think it is. So how well you do. And then commander skills, equipments, and consumables, that's what they're going to be changing or making variations of, adding more. I mean, I would love to see more equipment consumables. I thought that that's what they were going to do when they first made all of these changes, that I thought, brilliant, we've got loads more kind of customization options, they're going to come out with new stuff. But in fact, they actually removed some of the older stuff that we had previously, and then never added them back or added anything different to what we had. So we just ended up with less customization. So more commander skills, more nuanced stuff, even if they might think, oh, it's not really going to do a whole lot. Like, for example, a crew skill that gives you an increased chance to set someone on fire. Something like that, you know. Someone might use it in a weird build that is fun. You know what I mean? Like, this sort of stuff, it might not be that interesting or that overpowered, but it's something different and you can choose it. And I think more customization with that sort of stuff is cool. You can create cool stuff. I think that's what everybody wants to see. And it's more rewarding as well when things like that, when you set up your tank in the way you want and it actually does well. I think that's really cool. Maps and base capture rules. Hopefully we'll be seeing some actual balancing of some of the capture points on maps. There's been some terrible, like they have struggled with this since the inception of World of Tanks console. I don't know what goes on. They have moved the bases around. They've completely swapped spawns 90 degrees from where they've been. They've edited them as much as possible. And I think the key thing comes down to the fact that a lot of the assault game modes are just heavily imbalanced. So when you play assault, so, you know, going towards like one team is defending, one team is attacking, and there's no rounds. So like if you get on the defending team and there's like a 70% chance that you win if you're on the defending team, it's just a bit boring. I would say, like, you know what I mean? If you're the attacking team, it's like, it's this map. Oh, we've got to attack. It's not ideal. And of course, I think capture rules, the main thing that I would do is avoid, if there are so many tanks left alive on the enemy team, say there's like 7 tanks. I'm not going to say that is the exact number they should do. Say there's 7 tanks left on the enemy team. I do not think you should be able to capture the base. Just from like a logical standpoint, if there are 7 tanks on the enemy team and there's 2 on yours, like, and you capture the base, like, in reality, are you going to be able, like, theoretically, say the battle went on again and it was a 2 versus 7 after you've completed the game, and then another game happened where it's 2 versus 7 and you got to defend that point, are you going to be able to defend against 7 tanks? Probably not. Therefore, I don't think you should be able to cap and win the game by simply capping the circle out because 2 of you got in the cap and there's 7 people who have actually pushed and done the hard work in the game and then have to now track all the way back to the cap circle, but by which time they've already lost. So I think a certain amount of tanks have to be removed from the game, or simply that you cannot capture the base within a certain amount of time, because we've all been in a game where maybe within 3 minutes of the game is lost because someone has jumped in the cap circle, or like no one was on one side of the map because, you know, they went all lemming rush down one side of the map and the whole enemy team went in the other side and they just went straight into the cap circle. Like, that is not fun. That's not rewarding gameplay. It's not interesting and no one gets any XP. It's just a complete waste of time. And being able to cap a base within, you know, 2 minutes or 3 minutes because like 3 people jumped in the cap circle and didn't want to move and end up getting less XP than the enemy team who actually decided to fight. It's not very fun and it doesn't feel like a victory for anyone in the game. And so, yeah, I think that they just change it how it actually works. I think that would be a good change. I think it would be well received by pretty much everyone who is playing the game. And yeah, it would just be a good addition and reward people for actually trying to play the game rather than just like taking an easy way out of a game, I think. And then balance changes for tech tree and premium tanks. So this is what their strategy is for upcoming balance changes. So tech tree and premium tank balance adjustments, lots of stock tank loadout improvements, general stat based improvements, damage, armor, penetration, speed, etc. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that we do not need any more damage changes, because the whole reason we have the whole issue with these fast games is that high alpha things are just basically steamrolling like the game. Like, you know, the FE 4005s removing people from full health, the Tyrans removing half the health of a tank within one shot, reloading 10 seconds, finishing off the next half of their health. And then, you know, damage improving damage is just going to speed up games. Like, the engagements are going to be faster. The disparity between high alpha, low alpha, very low alpha, medium alpha, it's just going to end up getting all skewed upwards. And so everything has more alpha, which means everything is going to be fighting faster. And if health doesn't improve, what is really going to happen there? Well, it just means people are going to die faster. And so it's going to end up with more blowout games. So damage is something I would not be messing with. In fact, if I wanted to prolong the game, as they say here in number 1, we want to increase average match times, I would be reducing the alpha of some of the tanks. So in World War II, they're saying that 120 tanks will be changed, shell alpha damage updates, 60 medium tanks, 50 heavy tanks, 15 tank destroyers, and a few premium tanks. This is not what I would say is needed. We need to reduce the alpha of a lot of these high alpha tank destroyers, so things that are dealing 1800 damage, things like that can one-shot people. That is what most people get frustrated about. You know, you go around a corner, you see an FE 4005, it YOLOs straight at you just to deal one shot of damage, gets completely annihilated in the process, so it wasn't actually worth it for them to do, but you get removed for no reason. It wasn't a good play by the enemy team, and it's like, what do you do? Like, giving more alpha to people just means faster games, I think, is going to happen. And whilst you as a heavy tank, because I'm assuming what they'll do is buff the mediums and the heavies so that they get more alpha, so that they can compete more with the TDs, it still doesn't solve the problem that the TDs have the high alpha, so just remove the alpha off of the TDs a little bit. You know, 850 damage on TD down to 700, remove these for 1800 damage or 1600 damage or 1400 damage tanks, remove the alpha down to, you know, a reasonable amount like 1100, that sort of thing, and that makes it balanced. There you go. You don't need to change all of these mediums and heavy tanks. You've solved the issue. Everyone has the same amount of health. The tank destroyers don't have as much alpha, and so you don't need to buff all the 60 medium and heavy tanks. I would assume the problem is that the fact that all of those really high alpha damage tanks, I wonder, what are they premium or are they standard tech tree vehicles? Ah, yes, that is it. They are all premium vehicles, bar like a few, like Gorilla 15, E4, like the, you know, it's the Ruthlesses, the Tyrants, like these sorts of tanks, the high alpha tanks. These are mainly premium vehicles, so I think that is the reason why they are buffing the damage. But at the same time, you need to buff the health of the other vehicles. If you're buffing damage, buff the health by the same proportion of those vehicles, so that the damage done to vehicles or the health point pool of games is not changed. So like the games last the same amount of time, it's just now the disparity between tank destroyers and heavy tanks isn't as much. Otherwise, it's just faster games for everyone. Armor. Now, hopefully this armor changes means that heavy tanks and tanks that are supposed to have armor can be dealing with, for example, the really annoying tank destroyers that have premium rounds that just go through any area of the front of a vehicle, whether that be straight through the turret, straight through the upper plate. This sort of stuff, very bad for like intuitive, engaging, strategic or rewarding gameplay. It's pretty much, oh, I didn't know there was a Tyran there, he's penned me straight through the mantlet of my E100. Yeah, that was fun. I've just lost 1,000 of my health. Not very rewarding, not very fun, pretty frustrating, and considering that that's supposed to be a very thick piece of armor, even like they're shooting the worst places to possibly shoot on your heavy, like super heavy vehicle, and it still pens. So this is something that, unless they actually remove the ability for those tanks, as I say, what I would do, find those tanks that are super high penetration and reduce them. But instead, what are they going to do? They're going to buff all of the armor of the vehicles instead. Same goes with penetration. They're going to improve the penetration, I would assume, because improvements, meaning they're going to go up. Penetration, they could go down if they're making nerfs to tanks that are overpowered. But penetration, this needs to be solved, because the penetration increase is probably one of the worst things about like the heavy tank class or tanks with armor, is because over time, they have buffed so many vehicles, so much penetration, that like even like the bad premium penetration vehicles that used to be bad aren't really ever struggling to pen if you're actually aiming at weak points, which is pretty bad, like considering that, you know, some of those light tanks that have low penetration like really don't actually struggle to go through super heavies that are a tier up from them. It's just not really the gameplay that is supposed to be. It removes the whole class aspect and kind of that strategy that I think a lot of people enjoy. And so if they're improving the penetration of these tanks, I just feel like it's going to lead to more damaging shots in places where people shouldn't have penned in the first place, meaning that more damage is going to be done, meaning that more tanks are going to get taken out quicker, which means the game is going to go faster. And so that is the problem. Same with the speed. Improve the speed of vehicles, I would assume, means that they're going to get into position faster, which means they're going to be able to YOLO faster, and that's going to cause a problem because the games are going to go faster, which from what I can tell isn't going to increase the average times of matches. Now, what you could do is increase the health, reduce the speed of some of the high speed tank destroyers, the high speed, medium tanks that are basically making light tanks pointless to play because they have more DPM, more speed, and more health than a lot of the light tanks, which are basically playing the exact same role, although they don't get the light tank on the move camo bonus that light tanks do. Yeah. I don't think you need speed, I don't think you need penetration, and I don't think you need damage, and if they are doing all three of these, then they need to buff the health pool of some of these tanks. So hopefully that's what they'll do, is that if they're buffing the damage, they're buffing the penetration, they're buffing the speed, improve the health of the mediums, the heavies, the light tanks, leave the tank destroyers where they are, because that is where the core problem is. And that is what they'll do. Now, I haven't seen any light tanks get some improvements. Remember, this is balance changes. Now, light tanks are in quite possibly the worst state they've ever been within the game. And they've done no buffs or changes to light tanks in these 120 plus tanks. It's not looking good for the Manticore drivers out there, considering now there's going to be even more of a disparity between the mediums and the light tanks, to the point where most people are just going to play mediums. So light tanks, they need some love. Hopefully they'll do this, because I think a lot of the light tanks are just kind of sucky right now, even though you can have very good games in them. They just need some buffs. Give them better view range, give them better camo, and reduce the overall spotting potential of the heavy, the medium tanks, so that light tanks have more of a role within the game. Details about all of these changes will be available, published on Monday, July 28th. So all of these changes are coming in July 29th, at least the next wave of balancing changes. So this is these tanks that are going to be changed on July 29th. We'll be reviewing premium tanks considered overpowered and or toxic by the player base, and are implementing balance changes to level the playing field between premiums and tech tree vehicles. I think that this is something that is very important. As I said, things like the AVRE, things that do a lot of splash damage. Now, whilst I actually personally do not think the AVRE is overpowered, it's actually pretty bad for the most part. It's slow, it has high alpha, that can pen things. It's just very toxic, because what happens is that you essentially, if you're playing a medium tank, cannot face this thing because of the fact that if you face it, it's going to fire at you regardless. Maybe it pens you and you lose 1400 damage or whatever. Or it splashes you for 600 and you can maybe get one shot back against it. Or what happens is you bounce your shot because it's got a huge space plate on the front of it, which, you know, if you get bad RNG, can actually go into that, and that causes a problem. So this will start with a small sample size, with some releases later in the season, including in this small sample will be the SU-152 Turan and the FV-4003 Centurion Mark V AVRE. So this is perfect. This is exactly what we want. This is Wargaming actually making some changes. So this is what they're starting with, but remember, don't get too hyped, as I never get too hyped because of the fact that, you know, Wargaming can say things, but they've worded it here, reviewing premium tanks considered overpowered and or toxic. Reviewing is the key word here. Now, I don't know what needs to be reviewed about the SU-152 Turan and the FV-4003 Centurion Mark V AVRE. Unless they're saying that they are going to make changes, they just need to make the right ones. That's absolutely fine. These two tanks definitely there's nothing to review about, like, should they be changed. That is absolutely 100% certain that these two tanks need changes, because from the standpoint of fun and engaging gameplay for everyone else on the team, or simply for fun of people who play the AVRE. I mean, it's not a very fun tank. It's quite boring, to be honest. It's quite slow. It's not particularly the most interesting gameplay. And most of the time, a lot of the new players are just auto-aiming people and penning people, or simply just splashing them for 600, and whilst they can do better than they normally would. Like, they're not learning, they're not getting anything out of it. And considering that these are tier 10 tanks that can be bought by people, yeah, it's this sort of thing definitely needs some changes. For the Turan, I would basically reduce the alpha to maybe like 750. So remove the 200 alpha off of it. I think it's got 950 alpha as standard. So remove it down all the way down to like 750, 700. Give it maybe like put it in line with the DPM of some of the other tanks. Reduce the speed by like 5 kilometers an hour, maybe a little bit more, and see how that actually plays within the game. Obviously, they'll have to test it, see what it actually plays like if they did that. Because you don't want to make a tank completely irrelevant. Like, people should still want to actually get it if it's like interesting or they think it looks cool, and it not be diabolically bad. But at the same time, it should not be like blatantly overpowered, where if you feel like you're playing against it in a tech tree tank, that it's like, well, that's fun. So yeah, those are some of the things I think that make the Turan very, very powerful, is the speed and the alpha and the DPM, because, you know, it has that like sweet spot of high alpha, but not too high alpha where you got a huge long reload. So that's the issue. More premium tanks and texture tanks will be reviewed and rebalanced in future season releases. Terrain handling for Cold War. So to that end, we would like to increase terrain resistance for heavier Cold War tanks to improve gameplay variety. So, you know, your heavy tanks can't just roll around the battlefield at 70 miles an hour. So what they're going to do is, for 1 week, starting on July 22nd, we'll be running a live test of updates to terrain handling stats on several Cold War tanks. So these are heavy tanks and tank destroyers. Eras 2 and Era 3. So that's 22nd to the 28th, ending with the server restart on July 29th. The maps available will be Fisherman's Bay, El Alamein, Swamp, Pearl River, Sevorgos, Desfall, Kalbang, Mannerheim, Fredvang, Nebelberg, Azure Coast, Vineyards, Corellia, Siegfried Line, Duke Pass, Canals, and Safe Haven. Important note, during this week only, the map rotations for Era 2s and 3 will include only the maps listed above, so the ones I've just said. So I'll pause the video here. Well, you can pause the video here if you want to take a quick look at the maps, but there you go, that should be enough time to pause it. And our goal with updating terrain handling for these vehicles is to improve how tank rolls affect the battle performance. Reduce teams that group up into too large numbers rushing forward on the map. So this is essentially where now the mediums and the light tanks will speed off, but they won't be exactly in the same point as the heavy tanks. So you're not going to get heavy tanks that are essentially rolling around with the packs and mediums and light tanks in the exact same roll, just with more health and typically higher alpha than the mediums. So it makes that roll disparity better, which means playing different tanks, different tank classes, like there's a point to it. It's not just, let's all play heavy tanks with good armor and good DPM and basically dominate any medium tanks in the game, because we've got armor as well. So that should hopefully help. So, you know, the terrain resistances means that they'll go slower up hills. It means that they'll go slower in certain terrain types. It means you can't just go up to top speed instantly, like with some of the areas. Hard terrain, typically you go up to top speed faster than, for example, swampy terrain. So if you know Lakeville and you go on the canyon side of the map, you know there's the swampy bit. That's basically what hopefully we'll see on a lot of the different maps for the tank classes listed, which is tank destroyers and heavy tanks. So that should be good. It should stop the YOLO meta in Cold War. Increase match times to allow time for players to pursue their battle plans. So that's the ideal goal. And then support additional strategic gameplay. which is also the goal, which should happen when they reduce the speed of these heavy tanks, essentially, because they can't get up to top speed. Player performative matchmaking. This season will be updating the game matchmaker to consider both a player's account's win rate and the player's win rate with the selected tank. This is in addition to the player's battle count. This will be shipping with the upcoming release in July 29th. Future improvements to balancing using additional player stats. So as I said earlier, this is exactly what I thought it was, and I will say the exact same statement. I think this is terrible for any game that is a casual game. Something where you're trying to have fun, something that you're trying to enjoy. This is the sort of thing that you have in a ranked game mode where people are trying to be elite players, where they are trying to, be stressing themselves out every single game because, you're coming up against people that are very, very good at the game, or, the exact same skill level as you. You don't have those games where you deal way more damage because maybe you were able to farm people. Equally, like if you're a mediocre player at the game, or like, by mediocre, I don't mean in a bad way. Like, you just haven't played as much. You haven't learned as much, that standard thing. You're not coming up against like players that you would have come up against, and you're not having good games as much. So you're going to be dealing less damage on average across the board. For any player that plays the game, you're going to deal less damage because you haven't got players beneath you that you can deal damage. The only people that it really affects in a better way is probably like the lowest end players, the brand new players. That's probably the only people that it positively affects. But at the same time, you're not like, as soon as you start creeping up the ranks, you start to do you're starting to come up against more and more like sweaty players and that sort of thing. And of course, as I said, it just means that people are going to play the most competitive tanks because it's going to make it easier in the games that they're going to play. So yeah, I don't like this change. And I think it's just boring. And like, how do you differentiate between it? Like, when I started playing the game, I looked at the top of the team and I was like, damn, that guy did like 5 times as much damage as me. Like, he must be a crazy player. Like, I want to be that crazy player. Whereas now you're going to see that, no one's really doing that. You're kind of, someone did like 1.5 times as much damage as me. Okay. And then you never know if you're a good player or, do you know what I mean? There's no scaling between you and the good players. Like, there's nothing to strive towards. Like, you're just slowly getting better, and maybe you're not getting better, maybe you're getting worse. Like, how do you put yourself in a skill level range? It also means that win rates are going to come all the way back down because you're always playing against people that are better than you. This sort of stuff is very good for a ranked game mode, but I feel like for World of Tanks, it's a really fat L. Like, I actually hate this update, and I think people will. You might think it might be a good update. I'll let you guys play it. I've played lots and lots of games that have tried performance-based matchmaking. Always ends up terribly, unless it's like a competitive game that you choose to play the competitive game mode on, which they're not going to do because they don't have simply enough players to actually play a competitive game mode versus a standard game mode at the exact same time, where you can pick which one, because less people will pick the ranked game mode because it's boring. So yeah, this really don't like it. I think it's also going to lead to matchmaking times getting much longer for the top tier players. Now, I have no idea if what they're trying to do here is that if there's one really high win rate player on one team, that another high win rate player on the other team is going to come out. And so they'll match like the team against a team of similar capabilities. So you would still have players that maybe have 45% win rate and a player with 65% win rate. But on the enemy team, they'd have a 66% win rate and a 49% win rate on the enemy team, like to match it up. Or if it is just a blanket, everyone on the team is like 60%. Because if it's that, I think that's terrible. I agree if it is like the players in the matchmaker are somewhat matched up against players of similar equal skill level to them. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's going to be terrible. Like, genuinely, wholeheartedly, I will come out, I will say it's going to be diabolically bad and I will hate it. Like, it's just what it is. I will actually despise playing the game. So, yeah, that's going to be fun. So hopefully it isn't the second option where everyone is playing against people with the exact same win rate, because that is going to be horrible. Commander skills, equipment, and consumables. When it comes to skills, equipment, and consumables, we'd like to create more player agency and gameplay choice. We're planning a reduction in low usage skills and equipment, as well as other improvements to the player experience. Here are some examples of improvements under development. So 6 cents added to all command. Oh, it's finally done. It's only taken 11 years for them to finally give 6 cents to all of the silly people that never took it. Oh, it's finally done, boys. Ladies and gentlemen, it is done. 6 cents is now constantly available to everyone. It means you will always have it. It means it also frees up that slot as well. So you can have more more crew skill slots. Enhanced target info. As I said, by the way, I've mentioned both of these constantly. Enhanced target info. Added to all tanks, freeing up an equipment slot. Thank you. Finally. I'm not even going to say thank you, really, because this sort of stuff should have been in the game straight away. Like, we've asked for it for like 10 years, and eventually they've realized that the thing that we were asking for like 10 years ago is actually a good thing. Yeah, we play the game a lot, and we've told you this multiple times, and now eventually you finally come across and done it. Now, I'll give props, finally, they've actually done it. They've actually made this as a good change. So finally. We're committed to a small rollout of skill changes. Smooth rollout that respects your current loadout choices. Our target for these updates is the autumn season release. So autumn season release. So it's not going to be this update, I do not believe. I think they're probably going to test it a little bit more, see what happens, see how these balance changes affect the matchmaker, see how the matchmaker affects the matchmaker, and see what the games are actually looking like then. Because what happens is, from a standpoint of like doing loads of updates all in one go, you might like be like, as a player, like, oh, just release everything. But the problem is you can't actually track what is causing the data. It makes it very difficult to track what changes actually made a good change, what changes contributed to a good change, what changes contributed to a bad change. And so you can't pinpoint which one did the thing. So if you add in like 5 different huge changes into the game and the game is slightly better, you might have realized that actually the game was way better if you only added one of those changes, and all of the other changes made it like very bad. And so it equals out so that it's slightly better. Or like, you know, there might be some tweaks that they want to make or some changes that are slightly want to be made. So I'm actually glad that they slow it down, and hopefully like drag these out a little bit longer so they can actually see the data and readjust some of the changes that they may have made or make, so that it's just better in general. So, maps and capture rules. So with several updates for this area of gameplay, we're exploring for a late release. Remove maps not viable for Cold War rotation. Thank you for all of the Cold War players. So all of the very small maps that just shouldn't be in Cold War are going to get removed. Change game mode rotations, reducing standard battle and increasing team destruction. I mean, for me as a player, I don't mind about that, but it's not really solving the core issue, I don't think. A live test of game mode rotation changes is targeted for the final week of September. And then prevent early base captures that end matches too soon. This, I think, will be a limit to when you can actually capture a base. So maybe it's grayed out and then it pops up like 5 minutes into a game or like 6 minutes into a game or something like that. And then you can capture the base. For me personally, I think it should be like 8 minutes. Maybe not that. Maybe that's too far. Maybe that's the elitist in me coming out. And but maybe it should be like 6 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that, before you can actually start capping the base, because that means you will have been about 50% of the way through the map, through the match, by the time that you actually like cap the circle. Because obviously 5 minutes in, that's a third of the time, and then an extra like 2-3 minutes to actually capture the base means you'll be roughly around the 50% mark of the total time. Gives it enough time to see that the enemy team have maybe burst through a flank and turn around to defend the cap. I think that's a good change. So hopefully that's what they do. If it's like stops them in 3 minutes, so you can't cap within 3 minutes of the battle starting, no, it's just too early. You've got to increase it to like the 5-minute mark, I think. So yeah, I think this, like, the problem is that I'm very, very hopeful for these changes. Like, I'm excited for these changes. Like, I'm genuinely excited for the changes, but also I have been majorly let down, like, many, many times when I've got excited about what I think that they are doing in the game. So, like, I want to be hyped. I want to get really hyped, and I think it should be good. But at the same time, I just don't know. I'm hesitant because of all of the previous things. And I think a lot of people feel that way, where, like, they want to get hyped, but they've been let down so many times, like, over the course of years. Like, there might be like 30 times where I thought that there's some really good changes were going to come to the game, and they just have flopped hugely. Like, they've missed the mark completely as to what they needed to do. So hopefully this time they will. And, like, there's a lot of things in here, by the way, that are actually good. Like, objectively, they're good. Adding 6th Sense, as just everyone gets it. Adding enhanced targeting info, just good. Like, these things, very good. Like, no reason to have any things. But then, like, are they going to actually reduce the accuracy of tanks? Are they going to nerf how auto-aim works? Because I think auto-aim needs a whole rework to stop people being able to, like, flick halfway across the screen when they weren't even looking at someone. But yeah, I think it's a very good step in the right direction if all of this stuff actually gets added into the game. Whilst I do think that light tanks definitely need some buffs. Like, they are significantly in a bad place right now, as well as the fact that, like, if they're buffing damage, penetration, and speed of these medium and heavy tanks, it's going to make light tanks even worse. And it's also going to mean that, like, games are going to go quicker, which is not the intention of what they're trying to do here, whereby they're trying to increase average match times. So hopefully they just give everything more health, and that will kind of at least solve some of the issues. But just more alpha, more penetration, penetration, just leave that alone. That does not need any changes. The only change that needs to be done to penetration is reducing penetration on everything of all of these premium rounds and stuff like that. So yeah, it would improve, like, the use of actually aiming in the game. So either way, that is my full coverage. This video is an hour and, like, 7 minutes at this point. So if you've watched to this point, I really, really appreciate you. But I thought, since this is probably the biggest update that console are going to have to the actual gameplay, I think we needed to talk about it, needed to discuss it, give you guys a bit of ideas as to what's actually going to happen, some of my opinions as well. So yeah, hopefully you guys will get an idea a bit more as time goes on, and we get a bit more information, what tanks are going to be buffed, what's going to get nerfed, like, these sorts of things. And of course, some of the, like, good changes, hopefully they do actually nerf the Turan, the FE4005, AVRE, and reduce some of the alphas of these, like, premium tech tree vehicles, like the Ruthless and stuff like this. So yeah, either way, very happy, very excited, but also quite hesitant as to whether or not this actually does come out in the way that we want it to be. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like it, and of course subscribe if you want to see more World of Tanks Modern Armor, console, PS5, 4, Xbox One, Xbox 360, blah 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 blah. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.